For my presentation, I chose to do the Everglade snail kite after my trip to Florida during spring break. I was lucky enough to see one in the wild during a wildlife airboat tour of Lake Kissimmee. Everglade snail kites are a medium-sized hawk with a wingspan of roughly 45 inches and a height of 17 inches. They usually weigh between 12 to 20 ounces. There is a strong sexual dimorphism between genders. Females tend to be brown with white spots covering their entire body, while males are a solid gray color. Both genders have red eyes, orange legs, and a square tail with a white base and black rim. The breeding population of Everglade snail kites mates between the months of February and June. However, on rare occasions, the Everglade snail kites may breed outside their breeding season as well. Males display courtship acts in order to woo the females during the breeding season. Most of these acts are performed in the air. Males will flap their wings at a slowed pace while going up and down in the air. Following this, a pair forms between males and females. Then females will go scavenging for food and nesting materials for their partner. The nesting season usually takes place from February till July. The female then will lay the eggs in a nest. White and brown dotted eggs are laid in a clutch of 1 to 4. Both males and females will incubate the eggs for 26 to 28 days. They will remain in the nest for 6 to 7 weeks before fledging. Females have been known to desert the male during the nesting period to find another mate and lay a second clutch. In this case, the male will continue to raise the chicks. Everglade snail kites are able to breed in less than a year, and juveniles will resemble females. They are known to be a gregarious species and can be found together in large flocks during foraging periods or while traveling to a roosting site at dusk. Scientists are unsure if this is due to the limited food location. Everglade snail kites are listed as a federally endangered and federally designated in Florida. They are ranked as a G4, G5, T2, S2 species and range from apparently secure to demonstrably secure, but have insufficient data for a specific rank. The subspecies is imperiled, and they are not ranked on the IUCN. Everglade snail kites are in the kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Aves, order Accipitriformes, family Accipitridae, genus Rostromus, and species Sociabilis. The snail kite is a bird of prey within the family Accipitridae, which also includes eagles, hawks, and the Old World vultures. Its relatives, the slender-billed kite, is now again placed in a different order, making Rostromus monotypic. Usually it is placed in the Milvine kites, but the validity of the group is still under investigation. They can be found in parts of Mexico, Central America, South America, and the Caribbean. Their range inside of the United States is extremely limited to the lower half of Florida. Historically, their range reached into the northern tip of the Panhandle. Currently, their range is limited to just north of Orlando near Upper St. Johns River and southward along the Kissimmee River Valley to Lake Okeechobee and then south through the Everglades. Everglade snail kites inhabit marshy areas due to food restrictions. They are mostly found in wetlands that combine marshes overgrown with cattails and sawgrass, suitable for hunting snails with nearby areas of shallow open water containing stands of trees and shrubs suitable for nesting. They can be found in freshwater marshes, lakes, retention ponds, wet prairies, and canals. Snail kites feed almost exclusively on freshwater snails, as their name suggests, making them both a food and habitat specialist. While all raptors have hooked beaks, the snail kite has evolved a specialized bill. It is deeply curved and pointed and acts like a hook that is used to pull the snails out of their shells. They have also been documented feeding on a few other prey items, including crabs, crayfish, rodents, and even a turtle. However, its dependence on snails for food restricts the bird's range to marshy areas that contain these specific types of snails. The survival of the snail kites is one of the odder stories of invasive species history. Around 2001, an invasive mollusk known as the island snail that originated in South America and the Caribbean crept in to Florida Kissimmee chain of lakes. By 2006, the foreign island snail dominated the lake, and by 2009, it had appeared in several Florida wetlands. It proved to be longer lived as well as bigger than its Florida native species. The island snail was also more fertile and produced eggs that were highly resilient to environmental change and extended drought. It was able to quickly outcompete native snail populations. They are now considered to be endemic to the wetlands throughout Florida. Island snails are easily detected in a given wetland because the species lays the bright pink eggs on aquatic plants, as you can see in the bottom right of this slide. Whereas the native species lay the larger white eggs, which are up on top. The eggs of the exotic island apple snail are smaller and more densely packed. Eggs in a single cluster can number in the hundreds, which is a trait that makes them better invaders. The invasive snails are hardier and reproduce at a faster rate. This allowed for the snail kite food supply to increase dramatically, and it resulted in an unexpected positive effect on various animal species as a food source. There was a significant growth in numbers of snail kites and habitats throughout Florida after the invasive species began to occupy the wetlands. In 2017, a group of University of Florida scientists discovered that the invasive snails had impacted the Florida kite snail population in a positive way. They reported their findings in a paper published in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. They had learned that they were rapidly adapting to their new food source. Findings showed that in fewer than 10 years, the snail kite's bill size and body mass had increased substantially. Larger birds with larger bills were better equipped for the removal of snail meat from the bigger shells of invasive species. The heftier size of plentiful invasive snails rendered them a more rewarding food source than the other snails that were native to Florida. Swift adaptation to the exotic species aided the dwindling snail kite population. The scientists describe this adaptation as an example of phenotypic plasticity, or the ability of a species to alter its characteristics in response to environmental changes. The researchers suggested that the snail kite changes in bill size and body mass were direct evidence that phenotype plasticity may prove crucial to the survival of imperiled species in our rapidly changing world. The invasive snail species is shown on the left with a larger shell size. The graph shows that higher nesting sites are in areas with the invasive species, showing the direct correlation of the invasive species on the survival of the Everglade snail kites population. In the top right, you can see the invasive snail species obviously had a much larger shell compared to the native one. The graph here shows rapid changes in the bill length, the tarsus, and the overall body mass pre and post introduction of the invasive snail in Florida and the effects on the Everglades snail kite. The means of imperilment for the Everglades snail kite are similar to the effects that other species inhabiting the area face. The snail kite's specialized diet restricts it to certain habitats and makes it vulnerable if the habitat is destroyed or altered. The Everglades needs nearly continuous flooding to support apple snail populations that then sustain the snail kite population. The spread of the large exotic apple snails from South America may affect young snail kites as they may still have a harder time eating the adult exotic snails. The main threat to the Everglades snail kite in Florida is the loss and degradation of wetlands. The excessive drainage of the Everglades and the increased development of Miami-Dade, Palm Beach, and Broward counties have reduced snail kite habitat over time. Nearly half of the Everglades have been drained for agriculture and urban development. The Everglade National Park preserves only about 1/5 of the original extent of the Everglades. The degradation of water quality from agriculture and urban runoff alters vegetation and limits the snail kite's ability to locate food or to find nesting substrates. The present-day system of canals and water control structures has disrupted the volume, timing, direction, and velocity of freshwater flow. The natural sheet flow pattern under which the Everglades evolved over the last 5,000 years no longer exists. The loss of freshwater to seepage, flood control releases to tidal waters, and extraction for irrigation and urban water supply has led to saltwater intrusion in some places. Regulation of water stages in lakes and canals is particularly important to maintain the balance of vegetative communities required to sustain snail kites. Because of a highly specific diet that is composed almost entirely of apple snails, the survival of the snail kite depends directly on the hydrology and water quality of these watersheds, each of which has experienced pervasive degradation as a result of urban development and agricultural activities. Harassment from humans is also a threat, as snail kites will flee from their nest if approached, exposing their eggs or young to predators in harsh temperatures. Everglades snail kite populations within Florida are severely limited. In 2009, populations dipped to as few as 700 to 800 individuals. Their population did increase with the introduction of the invasive snail species and was estimated to be around 1,200 in 2014. However, hurricanes and droughts have affected their population over the years by limiting food availability during droughts and by the destruction of nests during hurricanes. The overall population of the Everglades snail kite remains unknown. However, some have reported their population in the United States to be within the range of 1,000. There have been speculations over the Florida population of this species. Some studies have shown that the Florida population of these birds rose to 3,000 in 1999. Their population in other parts of the world has not yet been recorded. The Audubon Center for Birds of Prey is working to recover Lake Okeechobee, as it was once a critical refuge for Everglades snail kite nesting. The health of Lake Okeechobee has declined so far that in 2005, kites did not nest successfully anywhere on the lake. Lake Okeechobee is critical to the Everglades' health and is crucial to the Everglades snail kite survival in its own right. The Audubon Center is also working to rehabilitate injured snail kites. The University of Florida's research team is always working to estimate populations. They use GPS trackers, nest cameras, airboats, and binoculars to verify the data. The UF Institute of Food and Agricultural Services researches when to turn on the lake's plumbing on and off and other human controls on a wild space surrounded by human development. The Everglade snail kite is protected as an endangered species by the Federal Endangered Species Act and is a federally designated endangered species. The Federal Endangered Species Act prohibits the bird's killing, harassment, capture, or sale. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recommends staying at least 500 feet away from any active snail kite nest, which are marked with warning signs in areas where human disturbance is likely. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the South Florida Water Management District depend on the data in deciding what to do at the lake and elsewhere throughout the kite's range. Regulation of water stages in lakes and canals is important to maintain the balance of vegetative communities required to sustain the snail kites. You too can help by maintaining distance from active nest sites and joining efforts to protect the Everglades. Join the fight to help save the Everglades snail kite.